But I still feel like I have a connection to that old world of comedy.
But which is your favorite? Because that's the question.
Oh, true. I'm sitting here like a dingus being like, these guys had the most impact on me. Thank you for saying that. There's way too many white guys that I'm leaving out.
Did you throw Jim Carrey in the 90s?
Yeah! Everything before prior.
Everything prior.
Everything prior to prior. Every Monday on my Instagram story feed and on the community tab on YouTube, I post an interactive poll question. We leave it up for you guys to vote on, and then we discuss the results here on the podcast. Before we break down the results, let's find out what this week's poll question is. And you notice I'm actually getting more into the comedy. Bro, this is a comedy podcast. And
this is a nerd podcast. We're talking about comedy.
Partly nerd podcast. But if I'm gonna start taking the fucking the long skull rifle out to these fake ass fucking comedy channels, then I gotta make sure I double down on this.
Part 2A channel as well.
So this week's poll question, more in line with comedy, full of spelling errors. What's your favy? What's your fave era of comedians? And the options were 70s and 80s, 90s and 2000s, and 2010s to present. And before we get to the results, Dante, how did you vote?
90s to 2000s. Sorry, 2000s up to 2010, correct?
Up to the 2010s, yeah. 90s to 2009, essentially.
Yeah, okay.
Or to 2010, then from 2010 on.
90s.
90s. You know what? I never even stopped to think about this, but I would have to. I feel like my guys are split between the 70s and the 90s. So I just have to figure out who impacted me more.
Yeah, because this is weird. Like, what happened? The 80s, I guess that goes all the way up to 89. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay, Carlin would be 70s. You know what's fucked? Is even like all these other guys came later for me. I wouldn't say, or I had lesser impact, but their impact meant more to me the longer I was in comedy.
Okay.
Like Dick Gregory. I wasn't when I was first starting out being like, holy fuck, Dick Gregory. I watched like him speak. I never watched his comedy, but he was always like have amazing speeches and stuff talking about just black people and culture and all this stuff. But I would say he had a greater impact on me comedically the older I got and the later in comedy I got. But early influences that were from the 70s would have to be Kaufman and Carlin. Bernie, I consider 90s. Chappelle, 90s. Like, and all the other guys, Martin, Chris, Eddie.
Cat,
2000s. Has to be 90s, 2000s.
it has to be.
Has to be 90s, 2000s. But I still feel like I have a connection to that old world of comedy.
But which is your favorite? Because that's the question.
Oh, true. I'm sitting here like a fucking dingus being like, these guys had the most impact on me. Thank you for saying that, because I read my own fucking thing wrong. Which are my faves? No, it would still have to be 90s, 2000s. Bernie's 90s, 2000s. Chappelle's 90s, 2000s. Patrice, 90s, 2000s.
There you go. Took you long enough.
90s. It's because Patrice was here last week. So I'm like trying to cycle through like, yeah, no, man. It has to be 90s, 2000s. Let me just list off the top of my head from 90s, 2000s, the ones that had most impact on me. Martin Lawrence, Jamie Foxx, Chris Tucker, Eddie Griffin, Kat, Chappelle. Like, these are just Patrice, Mike Epps. Bro, and I'm missing so many. Like, that's the fucked up part. There's so many white dudes. Burr. Lewis Black. Random one. Lewis Black, I was obsessed with for a few years there. Okay. There's too many. All right, now let me try and get some 70s, 80s guys. Carlin, Kaufman, Rickles, Pryor, Mooney. Shit. That's an insane list already. Dangerfield. I said Rickles?
Yeah.
Kaufman, I didn't say in this yet.
You did.
I did?
Yeah.
There's way too many white guys that I'm leaving out.
Did you throw Jim Carrey in the 90s?
Jim! I gotta put this book in my living room so that I actually read it. I've actually been like, this got brought up in conversation like twice in the past week.
Oh, sick.
Jim Carrey, Memories and Misinformation. It's half autobiographical and then half made up. And then the part that's made, like, look, I'll read this. I think I've done this on the podcast also. Meet Jim Carrey. Sure, he's an insanely successful and beloved movie star drowning in wealth and privilege, but he's also lonely. Maybe past his prime, maybe even getting fat. He's tried diets, gurus, and cuddling with his military-grade Mossad-trained guard dogs, but nothing seems to lift the cloud of emptiness and ennui. Even the sage advice of his dear friend, actor, blah, blah, blah. So, Norm MacDonald has to be 90s, 2000s. Has to be 90s, 2000s, because Jim would be 90s, 2000s.
Yeah.
You know what's fucked up is Carlin is so monumental to me comedically that he almost makes me want to say 70s alone. If anybody has had more of an impact on fuck my comedy, me as a person, Carlin mind fucked me through comedy and like brought me into personhood in a proper way. That being said, I still think I have to say 90s, 2000s. Anyways, let's get to the results here. Once again, this week's poll question: what's your favorite era of comedians? The options: 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s to present. 11% said 70s, 80s, 79% said 90s, 2000s, and 11% said 2010s to present. No, that makes sense. Especially given the people that follow me and stuff. It's mostly going to be 90s, 2000s babies. It's hard, bro, because all the 70s, 80s paved the way, but it wasn't until 90s that it really like took form. Pryor would be the guy, I would say, that really gave it that form, and then the 90s took that and ran. But everything prior, everything before Pryor,
everything prior,
everything prior to Pryor is like early days to me. Pryor is the revolutionary that brought in being more personal and talking about your life experiences and making that relating to the audience. But yo, shout out to all the comedians that paved the way regardless. Thank you for your services. And they say that a hero will save us. I'm not going to stand here and wait. Did we get YouTube results?
Let me see.
This nigga. And they say that we got some results now. You got to start pulling these up before we record going forward. 11 votes. Thank you to the 11 beautiful people that voted on YouTube. Damn near the exact same results. 18% said 70s, 80s. 73% said 90s, 2000s. 9% said the 2010s to present day. I said the 10s and 20s. I guess that makes sense. Does that make sense?
10s and 20s. You said 10s and present.
Yeah.
10s to the present.
Either way, I feel like people know what the hell I meant there. Yeah, thank you again. Please continue to support. Make sure you check out for the new poll questions every Monday on the community tab on YouTube and my story feed on Instagram. But that will wrap up this week's episode of the podcast.
This is Black Zeus, the podcast season 5.
I love y'all. Thank you for supporting. Once again, the Patreon is launched. If you do want to watch my comedy special right now, you can do so. It's only $10 and you can get it as part of the subscription fee. So like if you subscribe to the Patreon, you can get it that way, or you can just buy it outright for $10 that way. Once again, for transparency, I will release the comedy special for free on the YouTube once we hit 1,000 subscribers. So you can also just hit the subscriber button and just do that. You can support that way, whichever way you want to support. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all that. I don't necessarily use it the way everybody else does, but I'm there if you want to find me. AKA Black Zeus is the person to find on those platforms.